Welcome back to NewsX World. I'm Thomas Porteous and you're watching Focal Length, where we get you a briefing on topics from across the world. The Indo-Pacific dynamics are changing drastically, especially with the involvement of other global actors. So, how will US-China ties change under Trump? Are tariffs reshaping China's economy? Is Taiwan at risk of conflict? Are ASEAN nations growing wary of China? Can the Quad counter China in the Indo-Pacific? Is China's growing support for Russia straining US ties? And is the Belt and Road Initiative faltering? Let's find out. Joining us is Andrew K.P. Leung, an international China strategist based in Hong Kong. He has over 4 decades of experience in senior government positions interfacing with mainland China. He is the chairman and CEO of Andrew Leung International Consultants Limited, a firm specializing in China-related strategic advice. Thank you, Andrew Leung, for joining us. My first question to you is, how do you think US-China relations will grow under the Trump administration?
Well, the US-China relations has undergone ups and downs. You remember the time when President Nixon wanted to woo China in order to contain the former USSR. So that was the honeymoon period. But now China is regarded as an existential threat because it's eating American lunch on high technology and is threatening American dominance. So there is a bipartisan consensus that they need to confront China and to weaken China. But then with Trump coming up, Trump is more transactional. I mean, he doesn't see that America wants to extend its influence and extend its engagement around the world, focusing more on building up its internal strength. But I think that is likely to open to some sort of a deal. But of course, he's a deal maker, and he's voted to impose almost 100% tariffs on China. Tariffs is favorite, is negotiation tactic, but I think a deal is possible. So I think that the relationship China is gone to a new page, considering that President Trump has recently invited President Xi to his inauguration. Now, President Xi may not attend himself, but he's likely to send an envoy. So I think that this brokers very well for a more nuanced relationship between the United States and China.
How is Trump's tariff plan going to impact China?
Yeah, the tariff plan is likely to be implemented because Trump touts himself as the tariff man, and tariff is his precious negotiation tactic. So I think it's likely to impose a very high tariffs, set to be 60% on all Chinese imports, along with 25% on other imports around the world. He thinks the tariffs would bring revenue to the United States, unaware or regardless, it's going to impact on prices to American consumers. But as I said, tariffs is his chief negotiating steel tool because he loves the art of the deal.
What are the chances of China declaring an all-out war against Taiwan?
Well, Taiwan is a big area of misunderstanding between the West, between the United States and the other Western allies, and in fact around the world, on what President Xi is trying to achieve. Let's not forget that the Beijing has issued serially 3 white papers on Taiwan during the past 10 years. And all emphasizing the priority for peaceful unification. Because if people study the art of war, the best victory is won without wars. And then the two places are increasingly intertwined. Taiwan economy is heavily dependent on China. Over 100 million Taiwanese, together with their relatives, are already working on and living in China on the mainland on their businesses. And then there is an increasing people-to-people exchanges, tourists on both sides. students on both sides, and also even think tanks. And a lot of Taiwanese are going into the mainland to establish their businesses in restaurants, high tech, high caliber restaurants. And you see all the films and movie coming out of China. You have Taiwanese directors. So I think that this augurs well for the time when the future of Taiwan could be put on the table. And Beijing has already said that anything is negotiable except the sovereignty. And so I think that it is likely to offer Taiwan even a better formula than for Hong Kong. So I think that the rhetoric that war on Taiwan is inevitable is overhyped.
ASEAN nations have accused China of unilaterally taking control of their maritime territories. Do you feel that there is growing dissent among ASEAN nations against China?
Well, ASEAN countries form the core of the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership, which consists of the ASEAN nations together with the main trading partners around the world, including China, including, of course, the Australia and New Zealand. This Regional Comprehensive Partnership is the largest free trade bloc in the world, accounting for a third of the world's GDP and a third of the world's population. And China is right at the heart of its supply and value chain. So the ASEAN countries do not want to be. They're now increasingly economically more powerful, and they do not want to be forced to choose sides. They remain good friends of the United States, but it doesn't mean that they need to be enemy of China. So I think that there's likely to adopt a hedging strategy towards any kind of coercion. They want to maintain a good relationship with China because China is now the largest trading partner to all of them, and also is a key player in their regional supply and value chain.
How do you see the role of Quad in containing Chinese aggression in the Indo-Pacific?
Well, Quad used to be a very powerful weapon in maintaining the deterrence of China's defense forces in the East China Sea and along the eastern seaboard, because the eastern seaboard of China consists of China's key and critical passage of a channel of communication with the outside world, accounting for a bulk of China's export, on which China depends, and including and also key imports like energy and food. So it is a key channel. Along this channel, there is a choke point in the Malacca Strait, controlled by the American Seventh Fleet, and China, of course, surrounded by the first island chain centered on Okinawa, and the second island chain centered on Guam, with many key military assets. So Quad is an addition, allying with Russia, allying with Australia, with its nuclear power submarines, together with an increasingly close military alliance between Japan and South Korea. So they act as a kind of a very key deterrence. But now with Trump, I think that he's likely to view American allies less robustly compared with Biden, and he wants to strike a deal with China, because he recently said between the United States under him and and China under President Xi, the two countries can solve most, if not all, the problems around the world. And then his belittling allies cause problems for example, for members in the Quad, Australia and also India. And as for India, there was a recent, even the recent project of an Indian port supposed to be financed by the United States is now put on hold or is likely to be derailed. So we are seeing a sea change now coming with the upcoming Trump administration. in America's alliance with the Quad.
What role is China going to play in the Middle East crisis?
Well, in the Middle East, again, don't forget, before the Gaza war, China successfully brokered a historic rapprochement between Saudi Arabia and Iran. The two countries have remained at loggerheads for decades, and China successfully brokered a rapprochement between Saudi Arabia and Iran, along with their other allies in the region, leading it to expectation of a more peaceful and more prosperous prospects for the Middle East. And then all the Middle East nations are embracing this kind of vision. More importantly, the biggest customer for Middle East oil and energy is no longer the United States. The United States is self-sufficient and in fact becomes a competitor in energy exports. The biggest customer in the world for Middle East energy exports is China. So I think that the Middle East, the peace in the Middle East is very important for China, and China is likely to gradually involve its footprint. Diplomatic footprint in the Middle East, because China wants peace in the Middle East, and is also playing a role in war on humanitarian aid to Gaza, and trying to talk to sending an envoy to the Middle East in order to secure a better peaceful environment. This adds to, of course, the recent change in Afghanistan with the Taliban government. The Taliban government wants China's investment to rebuild the country. And so China is well placed to play a more important role in restoring peace, stability, and prosperity in the Middle East.
China has been accused of providing military support to Russia in its war against Ukraine. Is China's closeness to Russia alienating it from improving with ties with the US?
Well, there have been a rhetoric that China is supplying dual-use weapons to Russia. This rhetoric rests on China's close economic relationship with Russia, but this relationship has been going on long before the war in Ukraine, because the two countries are highly economically complementary. China is the biggest customer in the world for energy and for agricultural products, and Russia is one of the world's the biggest producer of gas and oil, and also is very rich in agricultural products around the world. And so I think the two countries are linked together. Secondly, the two countries are pushed, not so much linked, but pushed together by American aggression, forming a kind of informal alliance against US hegemony, as forewarned by Americans' foreign policy historian Brzezinski in his seminal book called the Great Chessboard. On page 55 of that book, that book was, don't forget, was out about 20 years ago, 20 odd years ago. It already predicted the worrisome alliance of Russia, China, Iran, not to mention North Korea, as an anti-hegemonic alliance. And then unwittingly, America is pushing Russia and China together, and also Iran together, forming precisely this anti-hegemonic alliance. And so that's what's happening.
Do you think China's One Road, One Belt project is flailing in the wake of economic slowdown?
Well, China's Belt and Road Initiative was launched a long time ago by President Xi. The idea is to double down on China's contribution to global growth and contribution to a more connected world. And of course, China sits right at the heart of the global value and production chain. But in the beginning, China or many countries signed up on this projects, including in Europe, For example, Italy is right at the center point, connecting the China's maritime Silk Road, starting from the China's eastern seaboard all the way to the Indian Ocean, and then through the Red Sea to the Mediterranean, ending up in Venice. And from Venice, it picked up by the overland economic belt from Venice to Duisburg in Germany, and from Duisburg to Russia, and to Russia to Central Asia, and back to China. But the overland economic belt is very important because it brings railroad traffic, pipelines, bypassing the choke points I referred to earlier through the Malacca Strait. And so that oil, gas, and natural resources could be transported to China overland. Now, after a number of years, some of the European countries found that the benefits are much less. For example, Italy opted out, and that was quite a sea change. And more countries are a mile in debt. A poster child is the Hambantota port in Sri Lanka, because the country is already heavily in debt. So the lessons have been learned, and China is now rejigging the Belt and Road Initiative, making it smaller, more deliverable, and also working more with international stakeholders, including the World Bank and IMF and so on, but also with local stakeholders, and putting more emphasis on environmental sustainability and debt sustainability, as highlighted in the recent Belt and Road project in Beijing. So I think the Belt and Road project will continue to play a very important role because there's a lack of infrastructural connectivity. It's all to get very well to talk about funds, but then the countries need to be and they're building economic capacity need to be increased in terms of highways, roads, ports, schools, hospitals. All these are provided under China's Belt and Road Initiative, which is driven by the state, whereas the American alternative, trying to the Pacific Partners kind of initiative, is depending on private sector investment. And private sector, of course, is quite careful looking at their balance sheet. And very few private sector enterprises would invest in hospitals and roads and so on. So I think that the Belt and Road Initiative, having learned from its past lessons, still remains a robust connected belt between China and countries in the global south.
Thank you, Andrew KP Leung, for speaking to us on Focal Length. With that, it's a wrap on this episode. For more international news updates, stay tuned on NewsX World.